Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. So thrilled to have you with us. This is our second webinar of the week, legal as well. And so if you joined us earlier this week, just know we're going to go over other legal issues. We talked a lot on Tuesday about ways that landlords can get sued. Now we're going to talk about how you can address those lawsuits when they happen or other disputes, right? We have relationships with vendors, we have relationships with property managers, and with tenants. Landlords have relationships with so many different parties that it's bound to happen at some point or another if you're growing your business, your rental portfolio. So we want to be prepared with some legal strategies that we can use that are also not going to break the bank. So that's why we brought on with us Brandon. Brandon is from Dr. AI or DRAI. He is the director of enterprise sales there. Brandon Hendrickson, he has served actually in the US Army as a legal specialist. He worked for more than 10 years in the private sector with law firms specializing in intellectual property, civil litigation, and employment law. Later, he earned his degree in business analytics and he entered the software industry, guiding the development of data driven solutions that enhance workflow efficiency and client profitability. Brandon, thank you so much for coming back to talk to our members this year.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, great. So just a couple announcements before I have Brandon get started on the presentation. I know he has a bit to go into. We are recording this full presentation. We will send it to you tomorrow along with the slides and Brandon's contact information if you want to get in touch with him afterward with further questions. And if you do have questions on this webinar, we ask that you put the questions in the Q&A box. As you think of them, we'll address them probably at some point during the presentation if something pops up, right, that is relevant, or until the end if we need to. So keep a tab there. You see your Q&A there at the bottom. It's next to the chat. We might also have a few poll questions here and there. We'd love for you to participate in that. And as we go through this, also, if you want to take notes, you certainly can. But like I said, we'll be sending you the recording as well. Feel free to share this with any of your colleagues that you think would find this information helpful. So with all of that said, Brandon, thank you so much for coming on to talk to the members today. I'll let you start sharing your screen and get started from here.
Thank you so much. So this is my second time to join the members at AOA, and I always feel like this seems a little bit like a sales pitch. So I have to say, it's not necessarily a sales pitch at all. We really want to have a conversation with the members to understand the challenges that they're facing, the disputes that are coming up over and over again, because we make a lot of assumptions, but learning from you guys is our primary focus here, especially in the webinar. So any comments or questions that you ask really mean a lot to my team and me specifically. So definitely leave as many notes as you want and questions as you want because it's really helpful. It's not an interruption at all. But before we begin, I do have to say we can't give legal advice because we're not a law firm. And that's just the way that the cookie crumbles. But our founder is a practicing attorney in Texas. And like me, other members of our team have a lot of legal experience in general. So we are not a practicing law firm specifically, but we do help businesses with legal stuff. So if you have questions specifically in your state or your local area, consulting an attorney is always the best idea if you have specific questions about anything that you see or hear here today. So that's the boring stuff. This conversation that we're having is going to be specifically about resolving disputes, sharing knowledge about strategy, so that when something does pop up and you have a way to go through a process that kind of reduces doubt and time wasting and money spent figuring out what to do on your own. Because like Alexandra mentioned, things are going to pop up. And if you don't have a strategy in place before that, it's going to be tricky navigating that. So we'll talk about the different types of legal issues that may arise, different resolution strategies that you might already be using. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we help people in your situation when they do have disputes. And of course, there's going to be a Q&A. I want to make sure that we get all the questions answered that you guys have during this webinar. Or if you have some afterwards, don't hesitate to email me personally and we'll take care of it. But today is about exploring ways to reduce legal costs, reduce the stress around legal situations, and any uncertainty about legal issues whenever possible. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you have to hire an attorney. Sometimes you have to go to court. But if we can reduce that as much as possible, then we're doing really, really well. So that's our hope here today. Some of the most common issues that landlords and property managers face, we kind of made some assumptions here, but often, whenever you have to hold security deposit money or try to collect money for damages at the end of a lease, lease violations during the tenant's time in your property, or if vendors aren't performing as well, these seem to be like the top four, just based on our research and stuff that we've heard. But if you have others that are really strong, now is a good time to put those in the chat. We just probably think that these are the four top ones that don't generally mean you have to go to court. There are other issues that happen in the property management space for that landlords do end up in court a lot, but our hope is to reduce those and focus on these four here. So if those assumptions aren't necessarily great, then no problem. Help us learn how to serve you guys and give you more value by just inputting as many of those into the chat as you can. So one of the things that makes these four and other issues difficult to navigate is they're emotional. Everybody involved has a perspective. Like they feel like they might be right. They feel very strongly on both sides of the area, and that can be challenging to overcome with facts and data. Even if you're right, you still might lose money, and that's a tricky thing for both tenants and landlords to navigate. So that could be one of the reasons that it's difficult. Another one is uncertainty in the outcomes. Like, is the documentation or lease specific enough to cover a certain issue, or is it not? And that can be tricky, especially if you haven't hired an attorney or you might not have encountered a specific issue before. So if you don't know 100%, are you right? Is your stuff in alignment with compliance with your state and federal regulations? That type of thing can be tricky to navigate. And then last, the cost of pursuing these legal issues can be enormous. You might start on, an avenue of trying to get some money for something based on damage, and end up in a big, huge legal battle that you had no idea was going to happen. So if you don't fully understand how much it could cost to pursue a specific legal issue, that might be a reason that you have hesitance or low confidence when you're handling these types of issues.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And Brandon, sorry to interrupt, but I did want
no,
to
go ahead.
share the poll results as well as some of the comments in the chat just to help guide the discussion a little better. So just to give you all a look at the poll, lease violations came in first place here. Most of you said that's the most common thing, right? And then second most common and third in tied is the security deposit and vendor issues. To add to that, Jeffrey in the chat said, pool liability in case a child is drowning. So this is just liability about injuries on a property, which is certainly something of concern. I think the larger your community, right, the more common areas you might have at risk for that. Sorry, I just realized my light went off. There we go. And then Ron also was saying collecting past due rent and utilities when the tenant abandons the property. So not necessarily a lease violation, but like a post-lease issue
Mhm.
as well. And not having that good address to contact the tenant if they just just, leave in the middle of the night. Theodore also said also abandonment of lease is an issue for them. Stacy, how to handle falls on the property during winter, stormy, icy conditions. So again, injuries happening to people on property. And let's see, another couple ones here. Oh, I heard we are supposed to send it to collections and write the loss off on our taxes. Have you heard this before? So a little discussion there in the chat about collections as well, which again, post lease seems to also have some legal issues as well after the tenant technically leaves, but maybe just doesn't tell you about it. What do you do then, right? And certainly that does happen. So I just wanted to throw that out to you, Brandon, as you continue to present.
I appreciate that. And one thing, if you have questions and you've made comments in the chat and we don't have time to talk about them each specifically here, I'm making a commitment to myself to reach out. Your email address was used for the registration. So if you've asked a question, I will reach out at the end of the webinar, maybe today or tomorrow, to make sure that I at least address your question if we don't get the opportunity here today. So be expecting that for me if that's not too out of the ordinary for me just to try to follow up anybody who asks a question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for doing that, Brandon. I'll let you continue.
Thanks so much. So now that we've kind of gone over the different types of issues that you might have, I just wanted to highlight some what we consider to be common strategies for resolving disputes, right? Do you guys ever negotiate directly? Like, the full amount is $1,000 that you're trying to collect, but you might go to a tenant because there haven't been many issues in the past or something like that. And you might just say, hey, listen, I know this is $1,000, but if you'll just pay 500, we'll call it good. One of the strategies here, the reasons that you might do this is to maintain the relationship, which we think is very important, especially if you haven't gotten to a place where there is going to be a huge court case or there is going to be a definite break of the lease or something like that. So if you're trying to maintain a good positive relationship, I think a lot of people in a landlord or property management position might try to negotiate directly. So I'm curious to know how many of you have actually done this successfully, or if this is something that you always start with to try to negotiate directly. I know that because the law is very specific in certain areas, it can be very common to jump straight to legal action. So if something happens like a lease violation, you might just say, hey, if this doesn't get resolved by Friday, I'm gonna have to file with, whatever court or hire an attorney to kind of threaten legal action, but because it's almost required where you live, I don't know how often that comes up or if you guys are using that as like a primary method to overcome disputes with tenants or vendors, things like that. But I often hear when I'm talking to property managers and landlords that the feeling is that they have to hire an attorney if they're going to get any resolution. Like sometimes the law might feel very tenant protective. So as a landlord, it sometimes feels like you don't have any rights. And without hiring an attorney, you might not be able to make any progress. So that's kind of a feeling I hear a lot. But more commonly, and this is probably the reason that we started doing what we're doing to help property managers and landlords is it worth it? You might just let an issue go because it just doesn't seem like you're going to get any money anyway, and you might damage a relationship or lose a good tenant if you try to pursue it. So, what would you avoid pursuing when you have a legal issue? Are there specific issues or reasons that you might not pursue a dispute or a legal issue as it pops up? Do you have a poll for that, Alexandra?
Yeah, let me go ahead and pull that up here for you guys. And let's talk here a little bit about what is the main issue or the main reason you might not pursue resolution of a legal issue. And you can pick one of those as your main issue and maybe put it in another if you have something else. I'm curious to see that. Also in the chat, Diana says, I go directly to the tenant first and I
Mhm.
choose legal action only if they are totally not compliant. And we also had Ron also say something similar. I've tried negotiation and they said, go kick rocks. We're not paying. So
Yep.
certainly not always a good response. I've had that experience as well. I put it depends on the tenant, right? Like I know a lot of you have personal relationships with not personal, but I mean like you've met them, right? They're not just on
Mhm.
paper, where you do have a way to communicate with them and you kind of know a little bit maybe about what that tenant is like. That might also tell you how aggressive you need to be right off the gate if they do something poor, like, a lease violation. Oswald says, what about when the neighbors are purposely making noise, especially at 1 a.m. in the morning?
Mm.
Yeah. So what do you do with those complaints, right? Do you go to that tenant first and say, hey, we're having these noise complaints and whatnot, versus like going straight to issuing a notice of a lease violation or calling the police, right? There's so many different avenues we can take there with that. So just wanted to share that. And then Ron also says courts say if we can't find them, we can't serve them, and that is on the property owner.
Mm.
So another little side complaint here about if they do disappear, right? You start negotiating and then now they don't want to talk to you back. What do you do then, right? Also,
Mm.
Selena, what if they sign documentation saying that they'll pay the rent before they move out, but then they avoid all that contact. So I think that's pretty common is when they just go no contact at a certain point.
Mhm.
So sometimes, landlords may want to speak to them, but they don't want to talk to you back. So that's certainly something that could happen and happens a lot. So just wanted to share some of that in the chat with you, Brandon, as well. And then also with the poll, just to share some of those results here. Not sure if you all are going to be able to see this because there was a fill in the blank, but I'll tell you guys. Number one reason that they're not going to do and take action, not pursue a resolution, is because of the out of pocket costs. So
Mhm.
57% said those attorney's fees, the filing fees is really going to discourage them. 28% said time or energy required. Another 20% said that they're not really certain of the favorable outcome. We had a few people say other, and for the other responses, all of the above is what someone said. Also, they want to speak with the tenant directly. So maybe that works. And then they don't have to go through a further resolution. And another person also said all of the above. In Los Angeles, we have no rights anyway. So really, it's everything. But I think out of pocket costs are definitely going to be, the number one reason. And of course, sometimes the math might not make sense in those cases. But if it's a lot of money, if rent is expensive and you're missing out on that, that might be still worth pursuing. And also, if you can get your costs down on the attorney's fees, which we'll talk about in a moment, that's really where you'll see it really become more worth it. So,
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I anticipated. We always think that the cost is going to be one of the biggest, hurdles to overcome, especially when you don't know how much it's going to be, right? If you knew it's going to be X amount and then I'm going to get Y amount and it's worth it, that's tricky though. So I did want to say, you know, letting it go does have some risks. So if you decide not to pursue a legal action for whatever reason, if it's money or time, whatever the reason is, there are some risks. So one of them that we see a lot is that the situation gets worse, and that can be tricky. If you don't do anything and you don't discuss it with the tenant because you're afraid to damage the relationship, the issue could get a lot worse. And then you have, even more concern and stress and worry, more cost probably. And it could waste a lot of time and energy when you don't do anything and your mind is spinning and you're doing research on the side and all that time and energy, it doesn't produce a result if you're not going to pursue it. And that's kind of emotionally draining and it takes over your schedule. It can be really hard. So while not doing anything because you don't have a lot of time to invest in it is a result that we see often, it kind of creates wasted time anyway in the research and the thought and the wheel spinning, conversations with people, trying to get free information from attorneys, which is really tricky. And then lost revenue, right? If you decide, hey, it's only 200 bucks, I can swallow 200 bucks this one time and it won't be that big a deal. But then how often do issues like that happen? Is it 200 bucks a month? 200 bucks, only once a year? But it tends to add up. If you develop a strategy of not necessarily going after any issue because there's uncertainty on recoverability, because there's uncertainty on cost, so I understand exactly the stresses behind choosing not to do something, but we do eventually have to figure out a way to kind of try to collect some of that revenue that we're missing. So that's tricky, right? This is why we do what we do. My team is specifically focused on overcoming this challenge because it's generally so expensive to find any way to help this to resolve a dispute. So the attorney that founded our company was really focused on getting access to information to people so they can make smart legal decisions without having to pay a lot of money to an attorney. So, what we do is really focused on helping quickly. If you were to hire an attorney, it takes, weeks, sometimes months to get things rolling with them. But we've developed a platform, okay? And I'm going to show it to you just briefly at the end. We can talk more about it in the Q&A. But our platform is online, and essentially how it works is it creates a neutral place for both parties, for both the landlord and the tenant, to kind of tell their version of the story and negotiate, kind of like a direct negotiation, but the platform is completely neutral. And there are benefits to that neutrality that we can talk about more, but it's very fast. You can do it in a day or less than a week, usually is what we see. The resolution is very quick and it's also inexpensive. Our deal with AOA members is pretty good, but it's a lot cheaper than even just having an attorney write a letter for you. So if you could resolve your dispute and get recover some revenue or some costs that are due to you without having to hire an attorney, that's the ultimate objective of the platform that we created. Here's one of the biggest issues, though, is the documentation. And you would be surprised if you negotiate directly by text or email, or you send a letter, or sometimes you might just go actually to the property and have a conversation. That documentation, gathering that up, especially if they respond to you or they don't respond, documenting that process can be a huge step if you're going to be moving forward. So our platform, if you use it, even in the early stages, there may not be a formal dispute yet, but you feel like, hey, they were a little bit late on rent this week, and then the next time they're a little bit late again, you kind of want to nip that in the bud. You can create this conversation through our platform and document things that are happening so that you have information to share if you go to an attorney or if there is a lawsuit later. So using our platform is documenting both their perspective and yours at the same time while it works through its mediation. So it's really kind of neat. I'll show you that later. But the main parts are that it's fast, cheaper, neutral. And this is important. We're going to talk about this on the next slide, why neutrality is important. But I wanted to share one example and kind of talk you through how you might use the platform to go over this. If a tenant is moving out, and then you go to inspect the property and you notice, oh my gosh, there's so much damage here. There's so much wear and tear. You start taking pictures and you start, writing letters and things like that to let them know about this damage. And hey, you're going to lose your security deposit or maybe just part of the security deposit or whatever. But this process likely happens every time you have somebody leave. I think it's a rare scenario when somebody leaves and you go to inspect and everything is perfect. Here's your whole security deposit back. Everything is gravy. That's wonderful. You also might have, more damage than the security deposit and you have to go collect again. So this is a really good use of our platform. And what some people do is actually have a clause in the lease that says, when you leave, we're going to document this security deposit process through this platform, DRAI, and it's going to help navigate this so it's fair to both of us. And that's in the lease, not necessarily in those words, but we have a clause that you can share. That way they know it's coming. It's not a scary thing, and it helps you document. You can add images, you can add written statements, you can add documents that you've collected. If it's a bill from a vendor that's done some repairs, you can document all that on the platform. So while they are going through this process, it's all documented, it's all neutral, and they can participate as well. Hey, here's the reason I don't think I should have to pay for that carpet replacement. And they can add pictures and statements as well. So it's a really good neutral place to kind of go through that process, and it documents everything. So if there's a disagreement and you do have to file a small claims case or anything with an attorney, everything is right there at your fingertips to share with them so they know you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's, doing everything that you can to do. So one question I have, and this is probably going to be the last poll that we do, is if you had issues like this, how many legal issues do you think you handle in a typical year? That's a really important question because when we start to look at the cost, is it, one or two a year? Maybe not a huge deal. But if it's like a lot more, then it starts to be a bigger problem that we could probably help with. So I'm really curious, how many legal issues do you think you handle in a typical year? If there's a year that stands out, like maybe it was 5 years ago, but you had like 30 of these issues that you're just kind of thinking, man, that was a terrible year for me. Let us know if you have any horror stories that you want to share about specific legal issues. Maybe make a note too, because this is always a really interesting topic when we talk to landlords.
Yeah, absolutely. Ron already said in the chat he has stories to share. So, Ron, if you're listening, uh, we could maybe put some examples in there. But I'll share with you what I'm seeing in the poll so far. I'm waiting for at least half of you to participate. I think I just hit that. So let me go ahead and share here what everyone said. So it's looking like most are in the 0 to 3. Awesome. Some in the 4 to 10, and just a couple in the 11 to 20 plus. And of course, I think, I mentioned this at the beginning. Obviously, the larger your portfolio gets, unfortunately, the more successful you are, the more you're probably going to be getting sued. It just goes hand in hand with that, really, with any kind of business. But certainly, even at, if you have just a few problems in the year, that could certainly, take quite a toll, especially if you have a small portfolio. So good to see that not everyone's in the 20 plus, but it's still a problem when it happens. So let me go ahead and stop that sharing here.
No, I appreciate that. So I was glad to see that 0 to 3 is the main answer because that's ultimately what we want is everybody to have zero. That would be the best case scenario. So I was glad to see that. But even if you only had one issue pop up, think about, or if you had more, obviously, if you had more, think about this. How much money was left on the table that you weren't able to recover based on those? And more importantly, if you had a strategy that could recover a percentage of that money, is it worth it? And that's kind of the question that we're here to answer. So the platform that we've developed can definitely help you recover more of that. But one other thing that it does that can be helpful is it can analyze the case before you involve the tenant and use applicable case law from the federal courts or the state where you reside to guide you in that decision. Will it be worth it? Do you have a chance to win? Has this happened before in your state? And who won when it was brought to court? So rather than just guessing or saying to yourself, that's not worth it, our platform can help you decide and make that decision in a way that's going to be beneficial to you, whether or not it's good to pursue. Because sometimes we pursue things that don't necessarily have a good outcome, and that can be sad. So as we look at, we already talked about the question. Some of these issues that we've talked about today are definitely, you need to hire an attorney to do this. You can't do it on yourself with any platform, right? But if the value of the dispute is very high, and we don't have necessarily a threshold to say, but in general, our platform limits at 75 grand. So if the value of your dispute is over 75 grand, our platform won't even touch it. We'll say, hey, you need an attorney. But you personally, or as a business, might want to have a lower threshold, right? If it's over 10 grand, it might be a worthwhile expense to hire an attorney. If it's extremely complex because it involves like the example given of a slip and fall, that is a very complex issue. So you might use the platform to kind of analyze the situation, but in a situation that's very complex, I would highly recommend an attorney. Our platform can be a good place to figure out if it's too complex or not. So we can talk about that more. If you have specific issues, maybe set up a consultation. Those are free. We'll talk about that more at the end. If insurance is involved, almost 100% of the time you're going to need an attorney just because the insurance company is going to have an attorney, and it wouldn't necessarily be fair to you to not to have an attorney representing you. Catastrophic incidents. This it depend, especially in California. If there's an incident where someone drowns in a pool or has a medical emergency on your property, and the tenant even might recommend, hey, let's handle this ourselves. That can be, you know, a good idea in theory, but the result of that could create a liability for yourself that's really, really tough and cost more money later. So I would suggest, and again, this is not legal advice, but if you have a catastrophic incident that involves injury of any kind, I would recommend hiring an attorney in that case. Again, if you want to put the information in the platform and see what comes back, that can help guide you on how quickly you need to move or what type of attorney you might want. But anything catastrophic, I would highly recommend an attorney. So these are just a few of the different ways, but I guess the main piece is your gut. Like, does it feel like an attorney is probably a better way to go? Um, our goal is to reduce the number of issues that you think I need an attorney. I can only do this with attorneys. So if we can reduce that even by a percentage, that's our goal, to empower landlords and property managers to reduce the amount of money they spend to recover as much money as possible. That's what we're all about. So, as we get closer to the end of our time today, I really wanted to make sure you understand how we can support you. It's not all about money. Believe me, I know our platform does have a cost associated with it, but we have a special deal for AAOA members. And we want to offer a free consultation. And here's what that means, just in case you have questions. If you say in response to this webinar, hey, I would like a consultation, what we're going to do is pair you with one of our team members to go over your specific strategies that you've used in the past, how you can implement our platform and our team to eliminate certain situations from happening in the future, and then offer you a platform walkthrough so you can see how it works, maybe with a specific incident that's current or that you've dealt with recently. And then we also have what we've designed for you guys. Some people don't want to be contacted, right? I understand. You don't want to talk to me. You don't want to talk to people on my team. You just want to click around and figure it out. We have a member trial specifically for AOA. It's the only organization that we've given this offer to, and you guys can use it for a month and click around and play around. You can use our support. It's fully US based support, so you don't have to worry about, hey, this isn't really clear. I need some help. So that's really, really easy and a good way if you don't want to just talk through it to do it on your own. And then here's my last request from you guys specifically is send suggestions. You know, whether or not you get a consultation or a trial on our platform, tell me and tell our team in any way that you can how we could be more helpful to you. All the questions and comments, we really take these and our team discusses each and every single one because this is a business that we want to add value in. So we need to be knowledgeable. We need to be able to respond to everything that you guys deal with. So If you want a free consultation, you'll get some one-on-one attention from me and my team. If you don't, there's some other ways. But regardless, if you have any suggestions about how it could be more helpful or add more value, definitely send it to us. It could be email, it could be a phone call. I'm fully available. My team's fully available. So that would be really, really great to hear.
All right, wonderful. Thank you for that. That is a great offer, honestly, for you guys to try really low risk here. So definitely worth it if you have an issue now, or you just want to be prepared for the future. So I put up that poll question. If you guys say yes to that for the consult, we'll get you in touch with Brandon and his team. However, tomorrow I am sending that email with the recording and the slides. There will also be a place for you to just activate the trial, right? If you wanted to just, like Brandon said, go in and do a solo kind of walkthrough, that will be available in the email tomorrow. So be sure to check your inboxes for that. Sometimes I've heard it can go to spam or junk. So please, I don't want you to miss it. Keep an eye out for it tomorrow. At some point, I'll be sending that. Also, too, if you have any further questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I think really what we've really gotten a lot of is, questions that your platform would be able to probably answer, right? What about having a leak from the neighbors above and they refuse to fix the damage that was caused by the leak? That's an interesting one. What about a rug? I require the tenants to use rugs and they haven't put a rug in. What does that fall under, right? What can I require or can't I require of a tenant if it's written in a lease, right? Even if it's written in a lease, I should say, sometimes they're not as enforceable as you might hope, right? So sometimes it helps to have a platform like this where you can look at case law and see what have other landlords in similar situations done in your state specifically, and what have the results been of that. So I think with the research component, it's really helpful. And then also with that like dispute resolution mediation component where you can document everything. With Oswald said, this platform sounds like a great way to document in one place with
Mhm.
timestamps, which could be valuable, of course. I think doing it all by hand, especially if you have multiple tenants or issues going on at once, would probably be a nightmare. So I'm sure some of you have experienced that before. So just giving you guys some ideas for how you can use the platform. But I really do think if you can and you do have an issue, meeting with Brandon or his team member would be probably the best next step, just so they could show you exactly how it could work in your situation. Brandon, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, not necessarily. If it's okay, I could share kind of, what the platform looks
Oh
like. I'm
yeah,
not going
let's
to
do
take as
that.
much time to walk through a whole case, but I can
Would
just
love to
kind of
see it.
show everybody what it looks like. This is just an example of a dispute that I did a long time ago. There's the details that you can't really read good aren't important, but what I want to show you is I've input details and it's summarized that for me. It keeps any evidence that I've uploaded. This could be images as well, and it will analyze the images. So it's not just my physical description. The system does some work there too. And then I have an offer, so I filed this dispute against a tenant that happens to be my wife. Don't tell her. And then I've said, hey, this is going to be my settlement offer. And it has like a deadline. I can split this into payments. I can charge interest or not. And then there's a part right here, the settlement page. And if, let's say, my wife decides that she wants to interact with me, there's a negotiation chat room. I can choose to settle. I can counter. There's a lot of different ways that they can interact here. So the system will keep track of everything that's said through the negotiation. It'll keep track of, if they counter your settlement offer, if they accept and then fail to pay. So this system is really a good way to kind of manage, like you said, if you have multiple tenants with multiple issues, it's really hard to kind of do all that in one place. So this system is a good way to keep track of it all, and then make sure that you don't drop any balls along the way.
Fantastic.
They're always the biggest question. And are we still going, or did you want to do the poll results?
Oh no, we'll leave those out.
Okay.
And I just wanted to let people know that I had put the link to the AAOA offer in the chat, but I am going to email it to everyone tomorrow as well. So If you want to look in the chat, you should be able to click or copy and paste that link. But if you can't do it, just don't worry. I'll send it to you guys in the email with the recording tomorrow.
Perfect. So the question we always get, and it's not the main point of this, but how much does it cost to use our platform? So I put this little slide together. The trial is $5, and that gives you an entire month to analyze as many cases as you want. You could do 100 a day. It doesn't matter. Unlimited use. And then the trial also includes one free dispute. So if you have an active dispute that you really want to do right now, you could pay $5, jump on our platform, analyze it. If the information you get back looks really promising to you, then you can file the dispute and you can try to resolve that in a neutral way with your tenant or with anybody really, a vendor or a property manager that you have a dispute with. So it's not limited specifically to tenants. Anybody you have a dispute with, even if it's outside the context of real estate. I mean, this is all case law in federal and state that you could use. So it's very flexible. Or if you decide, like, let's say you have, hundreds of properties and you deal with this a lot, $49 a month is unlimited access as well. So after that monthly trial, 49 bucks will get you unlimited access to the analyzer platform. And then, or if you just have one dispute a year and you don't want to hire an attorney, 100 bucks. You can file a dispute at any time. That's not recurring. And you can use our platform. And these are rates that have been kind of negotiated and developed specifically for AOA. But here's the deal. If you have one property and you want to try to use the platform twice a year, and you say, Brandon, that's 100 bucks is too much, just call us, shoot me an email, let me know. Well, we're not so focused on the money, but we have to charge something. So if you have 100 properties, 99 bucks to file a dispute is going to be nothing, right? You're going to get your $1,000 or $2,000, X% of the time, or you're going to be very well prepared going into a legal dispute where you need to have all this documentation, and it's going to save you so much time and so much money that it just pays for itself many times over. So depending on the need that you have specifically, reach out to me and my team. These can be flexible amounts, but this is the base cost of what we're charging right now that's been specifically negotiated for AOA members. That's the boring part, but again, if you have any other um, concerns about cost specifically, we want to work with you. The value we provide is more important than the money we collect. So don't turn us an opportunity away just because of the money.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. Well, Natalia is saying, so your support, is it a live person that actually answers the phone?
Yeah, so we have a couple different ways. We start you with our chat bot just because it's the fastest and easiest way to get you information. If that doesn't work, we do have a live person that works during business hours in the United States. He's located centrally and he is a paralegal or experienced as a paralegal. So he understands how to navigate some of the challenges both with our software and what you're talking about. So it's not necessarily an IT support person, but he does know our platform inside and out. So he can help you both with your challenge or whatever. And he's only working, during the day. So if you have an issue at night, you're going to be stuck with our chatbot. But after that, if it's during the day, our guy will call or email you, usually same day, sometimes right away, just depending on what his workload is like at the time.
Great. Natalia also says, how long has your firm been established?
Yeah, so we've been around for about 3 years. We've been active in the dispute resolution space. Me personally, and the team that I work with that's focused on the landlord-tenant relationship, we're rounding out our first year. So we've learned so much. And this is something that I didn't mention, and I'm glad you asked me this, but I went to a conference in Savannah, Georgia, and I spoke to a group of property managers, and one of them said something that stuck with me. Sometimes it's my fault. I made a mistake and the tenant has a dispute against me. Um, and that happens, right? This platform, because it's neutral, is still a good way for you to negotiate that with your tenant. So if it happens backwards, and I know I went a little off tangent, but it just reminded me because even if it's against you, you can use this platform, especially if you have that lease clause that says, hey, we're going to resolve disputes in this platform. It's just cheaper and easier and faster and documents, what happened. So thanks for asking that. But we're always learning and growing. Our work across the country with landlords and tenants teaches us so much. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, and I will add to that as you started in your introduction that your CEO is a practicing attorney. Many, including yourself, have legal backgrounds as well with decades of experience in
Hmm.
law. I mean, you yourself have done, civil litigation, employment law. So, I mean, coming from that perspective, really, it's the platform that's new. It's not the
Right.
experience of the people who built it, which is
Yeah.
I think really helpful to know. That's really what drove the platform to be built was this need that these legal professionals are seeing that unfortunately your services if you're an attorney aren't accessible to everyone, so this provides kind of that avenue for people to access some of that. Also, Noel is asking, where is your office located? If we have some kind of legal action in California, can you take action? So this is to say that they're not attorneys that are going to come and represent you necessarily, right? You guys service all the whole country.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
anything to
No, that's
add
great.
there?
So our office is based in Dallas, Texas. The founder and attorney lives and works there in Dallas. But based on our network and the people that we've met in the legal field specifically, we can often help you no matter where you are in finding the right attorney that
Oh,
that does want to help you.
nice.
So we there's no case that we would take. We don't do any legal action at all. But we do know a lot of people in the space, and so. If you did need a referral for an attorney, we could definitely help with that.
That's wonderful. Another good question. How many years do you keep the files even after the termination of service by clients? So if you canceled your, plan here at some point with you guys, would you still hold that on record for them to access?
Yeah, so we keep things for 7 years active, unless if you can tell us, hey, I need this for a longer time, 10 years, whatever. We can set it up to be stored off site, like off our server, indefinitely, or give it to you permanently. So there's a lot of different ways for us to navigate that, but after 7 years, our server is set to basically flush any information that's older than 7 years.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, in any case, the statute of limitations in most states is going to be, like, what are you going to do with that information after 7 years? Most likely not much. Um, we did get a curious comment here about James I'd like to address, which is what kind of risk exposure does the building manager or property manager have if they don't address crime or safety or disruptive neighbor issues brought to their attention from tenants? And James, it's interesting that you were saying that because I've been reviewing some stories just to put in our magazine and Rent magazine and in our biweekly newsletter and our legal brief as well, which is another newsletter with legal news. I can't tell you how many new cases I've been seeing of landlords being blamed for crimes occurring on their property. And it's a very common avenue that when something like that happens, the tenant wants to probably pursue legal action against the landlord, even though obviously you may not have intended for anything to happen. But really, there's no law that says you have to have X amount of cameras, right? Or like whatnot. But the more you can show that you are practicing safely, like for example, locks, right? Changing those out as soon as the tenant moves. I've read a story about a tenant with, unfortunately, an abusive partner,
Mm.
and they moved out, but they didn't get the keys changed. And so they still had the old keys and they got into the unit. So it's things like that where, you want to make sure that you are quickly doing the lock changes, that you do have security cameras set up or some sort of system. Even insurance companies will sometimes give you a discount if you can show that you have something like that in place. So it could be worth it if you're also getting a discount. So just basically showing that you're being intentional about your tenant's safety can go a long way. But perhaps that's something that the DRAI platform can also give you some case law on, right? These are just cases that reach the news. I'm sure there's plenty of more cases that are happening that we don't see in the news. And I think that's why the platform is also great too, because it's just hard to keep up. Like, unless something goes viral, right? You find out about it that way. Like, most case law is hidden, right? We don't really see it, right? Would you agree with that, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely. I would. And especially if it's old, we see stuff that's current or this happened, recently. But case law that sets a precedent. Maybe it happened 10 years ago, but nothing's come to overturn or overrule that. That can be really applicable in the state where you live. So I highly recommend finding some way, even if it's not our platform, to analyze case law around that if it's an issue for you. Google helps, but we talked about this a lot in our last webinar, so I don't want to open this can too much. But if you're using like ChatGPT or another form of AI that hallucinates or has a habit of hallucinating, be really careful with the case law you get there because that can be really disruptive or costly if it's wrong.
Absolutely. And we have a Rent article coming out on that, our Rent magazine that Brandon and David wrote for us. So we'll be sending you all that in a couple of weeks, hopefully. Well, I think that really sums up then most of the questions. See, Noel had one more here. You mentioned $5 per month. Is that just like membership? If not, then is there membership? How much? So that $5 per month is the trial for 1 month. Then
Mhm.
the actual price per month is $49 per month,
Right.
if I
Yeah.
recall. Yeah. So it's really there for you to try it. And
Mhm.
then if you like it, you can continue on with the $49 per month membership. So I hope that
No
answers your
contract.
question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. So if you use it for a month and decide, you don't like it or you don't need it or you don't, no contract. So there's no reason to stop. But if it's valuable and you find it is helping you save money, it is helping you keep track of the disputes that you have with your tenants, you can keep it as long as you like. If you really like it and just want to pay for a year up front, we'll work a deal with you for sure because we're all about saving you money. But
Good.
that's the goal. We're not trying to just take advantage of people that have a need.
Good. Well, I'm so glad to hear that, Brandon. And again, everyone, I will send you the email by end of day tomorrow with Brandon's information, the link to get the $5 per month trial, the slides, the recording. Am I forgetting anything? I don't know, but if I did, let me know in the chat. And then also, I hope you all will join us on Tuesday for our next webinar, which is about 1031 exchanges. Noel says $49 per month is unlimited consultation. Uh,
Yeah, it's unlimited
kind
use of the
of.
platform.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you had a question about what the platform was talking to you guys about, we're always available. Like this is my full-time job, so if you call me every day, James, we might have to set something up on the side. But
Within reason, yes.
yeah,
Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you all have a lovely Thursday and rest of the weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye, Brandon. Thank
bye
you.
bye. Thanks so much.